Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and my guest this week is George Goulburn. Oh my gosh, we just talked about it and I still messed it up. George Goulburn. And he left the corporate world a couple of years ago as a corporate executive, specifically to become a male escort. And he says that it's been one of the most fulfilling things that he's done. He's found a lot of value in his work, and I'm sure we're going to get into, his story and a lot of the ethical and moral concerns that people may have around that, and just explore what it's really like to be in that line of work. We're starting to see this movement in America. I live in Colorado. They're currently trying to decriminalize prostitution here. We've seen it in Maine. I'm sure it'll start to occur in other places like it already has in Nevada. And, it'll be an interesting, different episode. But before we get into all of this, I just have a couple of quick announcements as usual. For those of you who are new to the show, there is a very powerful story behind me trying to share everyone else's powerful stories. So head over to my website at zachtidwell.com so you can read about that there, and also join the mailing list to get updates about two big projects that I have going on behind the scenes. Other than that, if you've been listening for a while or watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe wherever that is. And if you are on one of those audio only platforms, please leave a rating and review. That just helps keep attracting interesting people like George. So with all of that out of the way, George, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Thanks for coming in and spending some time with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Zach. It's going to be a great chat, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do want to make, well, I'm not paying you for this escort time right now. So
No,
so
of course
little
not.
different circumstances, but the, I think it's probably a great place to start here is just having you set the stage for where you were at a couple of years ago before you entered your new career here. Is that fair to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Zach, my story from a few years back, well, prior to starting this work, is that I'd worked in government and the private sector for a very long time, for around about 30 years. And from at the period when one job ended and I was figuring out what I wanted to do next, it just occurred to me, and I can go into details, that this line of work might be right for me. And it's an unusual pivot. And I don't think many people would have imagined doing this work themselves. Certainly, it wasn't on my to-do list as a teenager. But here in Australia, sex work is legal in most of our states. So there isn't as much of a stigma as there is in the States and in many other countries. So and I'll go to the backstory of why I thought it was a good idea to move into this industry, because then it'll make a bit more sense then. But in the last few years of having done this work, it's been completely enlightening and a bit like your backstory, but quite different as well, though, Zach. I guess I'm trying to break down barriers and understandings about what this work is and what it can do, because there are so many misconceptions that people have. And I think it's really important to help people appreciate, not that they have to agree at all, but just to better understand what it is that this work entails and how my role can actually make women feel more empowered, more confident, and more appealing and attractive. Because at the end of the day, that's the main reason I do the work, to build confidence in people and make them feel much better about themselves.
Yeah, and I can see that, and that's why I was curious to talk to you about it. And just so, like, I think America generally is a little less open, or a little more treats sex a little more tabooly than and tabooly is probably not a word, but it's a more taboo subject here. And so as opposed to a bunch of countries in Europe, and like you said, even down in Australia. And just so you see where I'm coming from, so that you're not like worried that I'm gonna come out of left field and try and sucker punch you here. I have no qualms with it as long as it's consensual, which obviously this line of work is, and people are. If it is a consensual exchange between adults, I have zero qualms with it. So I'm legitimately just curious, and I do think it's a pertinent subject to be discussing, given just kind of where the world seems to be trending. So I'm open-minded about all this and just kind of wanted to hear what all your experiences are. But you touched on, like you said, that is a weird pivot, especially or with the limited information that we have of your history, knowing that okay, you had this in your mind that this might be a good line of work for you, and maybe that's harder for me to picture because culturally it is different here. But so what necessitated that? That does seem, especially from government work, I feel like that seems like a hard left turn.
Yeah. So look, Zach, my relationship history is that I was married for roughly 10 years and completely monogamously. And not too long after that relationship ended, I fell into another relationship that lasted around 10 years as well. And there were times in that relationship where I strayed, where I had affairs. And I really didn't enjoy that period of my time. And it's a bad thing to do to someone in my mind. So when that ended, I was sort of really left reflecting on what type of relationships worked for me. And I wasn't prepared or didn't want to go back into another traditional long-term relationship. I'd spent 20 years of my adult life doing that. And for one reason or another, they just didn't tend to suit my style, I guess. And in 20 years, you grow and evolve as a person. So I guess I was clear about wanting to date different people at the same time. So the phrase being ethical non-monogamy as opposed to cheating. So telling my partners that, hey, look, I'm really enjoying time with you, but I don't think I've got the capacity to just be with one person. And that's been about 13 or so years now, to the point where I've been doing that dating very extensively for a long time. So I really enjoy getting to meet people. I've had the most fascinating conversations with women over all those times. I've had relationships, mostly non-monogamous. There's been a couple where it was just about the two of us. But throughout that time, as you might imagine, when you're doing something so often, you really increase I guess, your awareness, self-awareness of what other people are like, and therefore it reflects back on me and what I like in a relationship sense. So I'd been doing that for a very long time while I was also working in government and corporate jobs. And it just occurred to me, some of the women I were dating had just expressed to me that they were wondering where all the other good guys are on dating sites. Because I think it's probably the same in the US as it is here in Australia, where a lot of women who have come out of a long relationship just find that the quality of men on dating sites is not that good, that it takes them so much time and effort, and just it saps their energy because it's just exhausting, not to mention the risks around their safety and just being able to trust men. So with that in mind, a number of women I'd been seeing had said, look, you really should get paid to do this work because you're really attentive, you really care about women, you have complete respect for women, and that's the biggest part of the job. So as I alluded to earlier, when there came a sort of a break in my career, I set myself up as a consultant in corporate space, but it was quite opportune when I had seen some media articles about male escorts. So that spark in the back of my mind that had been sort of lit by previous partners really just happened to be at the right space and time where I thought, okay, look, I'll give this a go. And at the time, there was a former male escort, and he was being a mentor to men over 40 looking to move into this space. So it just seemed to land in my lap at the right time. So he and I had a video call, and I paid him for his advice and information about where to advertise, how much to charge, and all those details. So that's why, for me, it wasn't an extraordinary pivot as it would be for most people, because there was an extension of what I'd been doing for so long. And so that explains, at least in my mind, why it wasn't too difficult, where for most people, they would never entertain the idea and they wouldn't have that experience that I had of dating for all that time.
Yeah, and I got a bunch of stuff I want to ask you about there. I'm going to pause this real quick though. I'm having some audio issues, and I'll pick right back up where we were. So hang on. All right, we're back. So, picking it back up where you left off, I think you said a couple things here, and one of them was one, I was curious to talk to you about, and I'm glad it came up kind of early so that I don't forget to ask you later on. But you talked, so your marriage was monogamous,
Yes, it was completely
and
monogamous.
okay, well, that second 10-year relationship was that monogamous,
It was meant to be.
and that's
So
when you
there
were
was there
stepping
was
out.
that's right. Yeah, there was no agreement that I was able to step out, like if in an understood way. So it was me
Yeah.
cheating.
Okay,
Yes.
and kind of a naive question here, but I just want to make sure I understand correctly. There's, I think, E&M or ethically non-monogamous relationships, that is a mouthful, are pretty prominent today, at least, like you touched on the online dating world. That's how I meet people typically. It's kind of hard to go hit on a woman when I can't see that she's there. So, unless I cross paths with someone at like a rock climbing gym or something like that, I meet people. I do the online dating thing. And so you see that a lot, it seems, at least in the subset of the population that I come across, that seems pretty common. Is there a difference between what would have been considered or is colloquially called an open relationship and E&M?
Look, they're fine definitions. So in essence, it means that you and your partner have an understanding that you have the ability to see other people outside of your relationship. The ethical part is making sure everyone knows what's going on. Within that, there are nuances. There's different ways people could go about it. So
Yeah.
one example, which I personally don't like, is don't ask, don't tell. So there's a broad understanding, but let's say I would go out and see someone, but I wouldn't tell my partner. To me, that's as close to cheating as it gets. And I can understand for some reasons the other party might not want to know, and you've got that ability to do so, but that's a style. It's not my style. And it's really about what style suits the two people. So, for example, in a previous relationship in the past, say, 10 years, we worked through the specifics of why are we wanting to go outside of our relationship. So it's really important to understand why you're doing it and then how you're going to go about it. And it's very nuanced and it's very tricky.
Yeah.
And I caution people against it because what it comes down to me, is it requires a great deal of communication. You've got to be an excellent communicator with everyone involved. You also need to be quite emotionally aware. You've got to appreciate that if I'm dating someone else, how's my partner going to feel about that? And vice versa. So where we landed is what we call partnered non-monogamy. And what that means is we were the primary relationship. We were in love. That was the main relationship in our lives. Anything else was froth and bubbles on the top. So we would at various times say, look, I'd like to date this particular person. We would talk about the details insofar as I've been chatting with them on a dating app. I really like the sound of this woman, and it'll be at this place at this time. Are you okay with that? And then throughout those couple of years we were together, the conversations evolved. They got well, they got slightly easier, but it still requires a lot of give and take and being clear about, is this still working for us? So that was where we landed. And just a final example is some people will have what they call relationship anarchy, where there's no rules. Um, and again, all power to everyone who does E&M their own way. But for me, I really like to know what's happening in my life in that regard. So I'm all about being clear and also respecting the other person that's outside of the relationship as well.
Yeah. Is for you guys navigating that, is part of that, is I guess on any levels that because you guys aren't able to fulfill each other sexually, just one another? Is that, I know you mentioned like obviously that wasn't working for you in your past relationship, but I mean that is complicated territory to navigate. And so that's where that question's coming from.
Yeah, I understand. Look, I think it's more than that, Zach. I think it's that one person can't fulfill all of our needs. So, look, some people, like my parents, were very happily married for a very long time, monogamously. But for me, we tend to put a lot of pressure on our significant other to be our best friend, our confidant, our lover, and everything. But that's just like we all have friends, right? So our friends fill a space that our partner might not be able to. And that's perfectly fine because I can't imagine just having one friend for life and that's it. And if I wasn't able to see other people, if I were seeing other people, that would be considered just cheating and not acceptable.
Yeah.
So I think of relationships, intimate relationships, in the same way. Yes, sex is a loaded topic for so many people, but it need not be. That's my view. And so I think it's a natural human connection, intimacy and touch. And it goes to the point of, well, what is cheating? So, and Esther Perel talks about this extensively, as do many other people, saying, well, if you are flirting with a work colleague, does that mean that you have broken the bounds of your marriage or relationship? So it doesn't have to be a physical act of sex that means that someone is straying from the conventions of the relationship. So yes, it is just, I'm an extrovert. I like meeting new people. I like learning. So that is the main part of it for me.
Yeah.
And it could be that I was having a great sexual relationship with my partner, and we definitely were. But at the end of the day, she's only one person. And I like newness and new experiences. Like, you like rock climbing and kayaking. You don't have to choose just one thing.
Yeah. Are you that way in other aspects of your life, or is like somewhere where you really need novelty specifically when it comes to relationships?
No, I am like that in every part of my life.
Mhm.
I love travel. I love being in new cultures where I haven't been before. I'm daily. It's part of my, I guess, the way that I've brought myself up, or I've been brought up to just seek out new things because life is fantastic, and I love
Supposed to
to be able
experience it.
to.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like sucking the marrow out of life rather than just being on the same train going to the same destination, which we all know where we're going to end up eventually. And so far as I can tell, we only get one chance at life. So I really want to make the most of it. And I mean, you might beg to differ. You had a profound experience that gave you a chance. But, yeah, so look, I think it's that's the way that my brain and my personality works.
No, it makes sense. And once you started answering it that way, I was like, that was such a dumb question. Like I couldn't see myself ever being in a relationship like that. And even as you were talking, I think some of that might be, my ex-wife cheated on me, and it was to the extent, I the only thing I ever had an admission of was emotional, but all of the evidence pointed to the fact that there was more, and they were just never caught red-handed kind of thing. Communications, screenshots of text messages, the other guy's wife finding them sending Snapchats and writing letters and all these things. But so some of it might be that because, we change over time. I was what? Gosh, I was 20, I think, when we got married. I had just turned 21. So like it was, I'm 30 now. Like things might have been different. So it's just, I don't know. All of it's eye-opening, and that's why I wanted to ask. It's just different strokes for different folks. But I think another thing you kind of touched on earlier was that you actually post these long-term relationships, you actually had women that you were seeing, however casually or seriously that was, mentioning that, hey, basically, you're good at this, you should do this professionally. And that made me wonder, because it is different culturally, and it is, sex work is legal in Australia, and I would imagine that carries, it's a more open subject in Australia. Is that because that if to think of an American woman telling me that, it sounds crazy. So is that more of a less out there thing for someone to say down there?
Look, what's really important to understand is that men doing the work I do here in Australia are treated quite differently, significantly differently to women doing this work.
Hmm.
So there is still, unfortunately, that stigma around women doing it. And many people have the viewpoint that they're doing it because they're drug addicts or they've got no means of income and they must hate it or they're just forced into it. And sadly, that is true for some people. But
Yeah.
it's not, look, I shouldn't be treated as some playboy because I've had that corporate life and now I'm doing this work. And likewise, women shouldn't be treated poorly because they're doing it for whatever their reason is. And then you come to people that are trans or non-binary, and they cop it far more than someone like I do.
Mhm.
So it's not to say that Australia is so advanced in our thinking, because I get a lot of criticism for what I do, primarily from people behind a keyboard who don't understand what it entails. And
You're always gonna have that. Yeah.
oh, I will. And look, I'm okay with that. That means I'm doing something right. If I'm provoking and getting people to think about things, and if they're being annoyed at me, that's a them problem. It's not a me problem, because I know really I'm very confident in the fact that I'm doing good work. It's legal, it's completely consenting, and yeah, I get paid well for it. So I have no issue about doing what I'm doing. And equally, women and other people who do the work shouldn't be criticized, because all that does is reflect the people who are doing the criticizing their beliefs. That could be religious, cultural, or any other viewpoints they have, and that's valid. But just live and let live. People are doing
You're
what they need to
projecting.
do to get by. Yes,
Yeah. It's it's I really have a hard time, I guess, not understand. It's pretty easy to draw a line like where people are coming from when they do that, and like see where, like, why they're saying that. But it just, in the sense of, if you're not hurting anyone else, leave people alone. Right? Like, I don't understand it. I am curious though. Is a disproportionate amount of your online hate coming from incel type of of people or communities?
look, I don't know. I suppose whenever I do some media that gets attention, it provides people a platform to spew forth whatever views they have. And there'll be people saying, "Ooh, that's disgusting," or you should go and you should be ashamed of yourself for doing what you're doing. And it is just them projecting. And I wouldn't attack people for doing what they do, provided, as we just say, it's legal, it's not hurting anyone.
Yeah.
And I think really does just reflect their own history or where they're at. And you know what? I find it really intriguing, because sex is the only thing that maintains the human race. So without sex, we wouldn't exist at all. And then we get strange about it and don't feel we want to talk about it. And I'm not saying that I want to talk about the explicit details of what I do. I certainly don't. And I don't do that ever. But for me, it is the joy of the companionship and the attentiveness that I bring to my clients. And that's what they hire me for. Sex is quite a way down the list in terms of what it is that they're seeking. And everyone's got a right to intimacy and touch.
And we
Some
need
of
it.
my clients, we absolutely need it. If we were to be left alone as a child and not held, not shown affection, you, it's proven that we would sort of wither, and that we need attention. So many of my clients have not had attention or even someone to hold their hand or give them a hug for decades. And that's really sad, and it's not spoken about. And we know that there's this loneliness epidemic. And increasingly, people are they're spending more time behind their computer. They're not physically engaging in connections with people. And that's where people like myself step in and can provide something that doesn't have to be sex related.
Yeah, and it is, that obviously we do have a human need for it. And I think everyone can understand that. That's why a hug feels so good when you're when you're having a bad time, or when you see someone that you haven't seen in a long time. And if you just don't have that, like you said, we are a more disconnected society, and it's very hard in general as an adult to meet people, whether it be friends or an intimate relationship. Like it's hard. People already have their lives going on. When you move to a new area, it's hard to meet new people, and especially probably as you get older and get down a certain pathway. But it's like you said, all that's natural. We have a need for that. That was actually something I was double checking before, in prepping for our conversation, because I had heard this before about certain primates being very promiscuous, and even some of them, performing prostitution, or like in there. And like chimpanzees, our direct relatives, do, like, it's been documented, whether it be food or their own, you know even grooming and things like that. Like it seems to also be a natural thing, and sex something we've made it out to be something larger than maybe what it is when it comes down to brass tacks, and looking, like you said, from a biological perspective, which is, humans have a thing to overcomplicate things. And obviously I'm probably part of that, since I can't see myself in a non-monogamous relationship. But I just don't think that's for everybody. But with you filling that role for people, like, it sounds like you were in a pretty fulfilled point in your life when you made that shift. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, it certainly is, Zach. I'd loved the day jobs that I'd had, and I feel really proud of the achievements that I made. And this is just another career move. And while it's, as we've discussed, while it's beyond the realms of most people, I think it's a really caring, as a friend said to me, you're in the caring industry. And I get a profound feeling of satisfaction from what I do. And to your point earlier about finding it difficult to connect with people as we're adults, many of my clients are widows, or they might have been through some type of abuse. And so they're afraid, or they just don't know what to do next. And so, like any professional, let's say, you might go and see a therapist because you're dealing with complex emotions. I am a professional in what I do. So let's imagine a sex therapist or a relationship therapist. Someone might go to them to say, look, here is my background. Here are the pain points that I've got. Maybe, in many cases, my clients have had some sort of sexual abuse, which is awful. And I make it very clear that I'm not a therapist. So hopefully that they've been working through that with someone. But ultimately, they might get to a point where they do want affection, and the therapist can't provide that. So I feel what I do complements that work quite well. And because I'm out there publicly, I've put a lot of effort into what I do. So if there's a comparison between looking at other dating options that, for women in particular, particularly if they've come from that type of background, they're going to be a little fearful or very trepidatious about how to go about it. And so, yes, my rates are not cheap, but what comes with that is the 15 years of experience, the multiple courses I've done around trauma-informed, conscious sexuality, and plenty of others, and enthusiastic consent, so that they've at least got a fair degree of comfort that I'm there for them. I'm looking out for what they want. And it's very much a unpacking of, well, what can I provide for you as the client? And I put in a great deal of time in the lead up to a booking. I'll make sure that I've had a phone conversation with the woman. We'll have exchanged quite a few messages, so I get a picture of who she is and why it is she has come to me. And that can only help improve or make sure the experience is exactly what she wants. And even in the case where she doesn't really know what she wants, and that happens quite often, I can tease out by some questioning to help understand, okay, well, look, let's start here as just a social catch up. No expectations whatsoever. And we'll just see how things evolve from there. And so it's really just an opt-in type of experience if they're not quite sure what they're after.
And I think you already kind of touched on it, that obviously it can start in different ways where it is more of a date versus, I'm assuming some of these take time to get to know each other. And then, but do you get a lot of, long-term business where these are repeat customers?
Yes, I have done. I've had some
Okay.
that have been clients for 2 years. And because what that allows for, like any relationship, and I do use the word relationship because it is one, even though it is transactional, and we both understand that, because it allows, once you're building up trust and respect takes time. So it's like an escalator, I suppose, in that the first experience got to be a good one, and they feel safe and they feel like they're in good hands. And then it can naturally evolve from there. And I've seen that time and time again. And it's not to say that some clients aren't one-offs, because they certainly have been, and it can be a bit of a reset for people to feel like, oh, okay, I made the step to see an escort. We had a great experience, and that's really opened my mind and my eyes to what I might go on and do then. But regular, like in any business, repeat customers are what you want, because it builds the rapport, builds the relationship, makes it an ongoing connection. And so it's no different in that regard.
And that's, you brought up the sex therapist thing. I had one on here several months ago now. It's been a minute, but it's, something I would not have thought of with all of this was like like you said, someone maybe being a re-entering back into, yes, this isn't the dating world, but it's dating world adjacent, or just, back into some form of intimacy after having been through something horrible. And that's kind of something that I touched on. Her name was Dr. Holly Wood. And when she talked, she herself was a sexual abuse survivor, and then worked as a counselor at I think a rape crisis center. I apologize if that's the incorrect terminology for anyone listening, like insensitive terminology, but, and then, she's gone on, and even, we talked about some of the open relationship stuff, sometimes that's what ends up working for people afterwards. And this is not the conversation that I expected to kind of touch on a lot of those things. I'm glad it is, because it ties in exactly to what you're talking about, like that there's, you peel the first layer of the onion back, and there's a lot more to it. As with anything, there's always, things are more complex and more nuanced than they seem at face value. And I, with that, is it hard, especially, if you've been seeing someone however frequently for 2 years, how do you navigate? Because that is, yes, you are building, whether that is a transactional relationship or not, like you are getting to know each other more over that time. Is that hard to maintain boundaries there?
Look, it can be. And because what we build, like I said, is a relationship. And at the end of the day, there is an exchange of money. So that makes clear that yeah, there is a business transaction happening there, but it doesn't prevent me having strong feelings for the client and vice versa. We're not machines. It's not just about you do this, I do that. So, and I'm okay with that, provided there's a general and genuine level of respect and understanding. And it can be, look, it really can be tricky, particularly when you've had sex, because the brain chemicals change and you feel different emotions flooding through your body. And that can be, in some circumstances, wow, I really want this person. And in addition to that, there's also, for some of my clients, I might be the ideal type of person they want, because I give them all of that companionship and attention and kind and caring. but I'm not someone they can have exclusively. So that can be tricky. And imagine if you've been outside of a relationship for 20 years and you've reached out to someone like me and you see this man that you think is ideal. You can't have me. And that's a really tricky thing, I'm sure, to get your head around. But
Yeah.
look, my clients, we talk about it whenever is necessary because they know that this is my job, and I've made a big investment of my time and my life to do this work. So it's for me, it's not as difficult as some people might think. It's not as though the clients are falling madly in love with me, because that's not on offer. And I can work around that if I feel or sense that something like that is coming up for them. So it's absolutely something that does arise, but I'm very attentive, and if things come up, I will sort of very gently push back and say, look, we need to have a conversation about this more thoughtfully.
Yeah. And it's just all of it is so complex, man. Especially like you said, you're getting some very powerful hormones and neurotransmitters involved once you start, once things are intimate. And so I, I obviously safety is still a concern. I feel less concerned about you than I would if I was talking to a woman right now. I think most people would, but obviously you still have to mind your P's and Q's. Like it's what can you speak to? It's hard because I'm curious more about what you do. I'm trying not to overstep or even come across as overstepping by asking the wrong question. So I am curious to hear more about the intricacies of this, obviously without getting into detail. Like no one needs to hear that stuff, right? Like that's not, we're here to discuss things
I think I know where you're going,
yeah.
Zach. If I may, let me sort of respond. So
Please do.
obviously, yeah. Sexually transmitted infections, STIs.
Yeah.
There's something that no one wants to get, but it's a risk when you have sex with anyone. So I need to maintain my sexual health. So I had a vasectomy a very long time ago. So that rules out any chances of unwanted pregnancies. I get tested very often and I'm all clear, and I use protection. Now, even then, that's not all foolproof, because condoms can break. And so I liken it to, say, driving a car. We all know how many people die on the roads every day. It's a risk we're prepared to take because we want to get from A to B. It's sort of a necessity to be able to live life, is to move around, whether that be on public transport or driving or walking down the street. So we accept risk of some sort every single day. Otherwise, we wouldn't get out of bed, and then who knows, the ceiling might collapse. So I choose to do this work because I like it. It feels good. But I put in place the certain boundaries and parameters to make it as safe as possible. So fact of the matter is, if you don't want to get an STI, don't have sex. Simple. But if you do want intimacy, you've got to be aware of the risks. Same as if you don't want to go anywhere in your life, do not drive, catch a bus or a train. So I like to break it down into those commonalities. So I think it's important not to put sex work and having sex as something that is more extreme than other things. It's not. And, as an Australian, I live by the beach. I've been a surfer and a swimmer all my life. And we all hate the idea of being eaten by a shark, right? But we know that the risks are minuscule. So I still go in the ocean as often as I can. And sure, if you don't want to be eaten by a shark, don't go where they live. It's pretty simple. But yeah, it is what they call the dread risk of something terrible happening. And let's say you were to catch an STI, particularly if you're in a relationship, that could be dramatic in terms of the outcome when your partner finds out and is wondering, what have you done? So yeah, that's what I'm getting at when I talk about risks, and if that, hopefully that was somewhat the pathway you were sort of edging around.
Yeah, that was probably going to be part of it. I think the other part that I was eventually going to stumble to as I clumsily walked my way through not knowing how to ask was, physically. I mean, do you always, hey, we only meet at hotels? Like how do you do all of that? I met a gentleman a couple of years ago when I was going to rehab for alcoholism that he was actually one of the providers there who was sober and now helping other people. But he disclosed like I used to be a male prostitute, obviously not legal where he was, but he went thinking he was going to be meeting up with a woman. And I don't remember if I know there was at least a man, there may have been multiple, and he got raped. It's horrendous, right? Like that's you still, even though, probably a little less physically vulnerable than a woman, like, or at least the perception is that, like, how do you manage all that? How do you handle all that?
Yeah, sure. Look, it is something I'm aware of, and I, yeah, straight up, I have nowhere near the level of risk that women do. So that is why many women work from a brothel or a parlor, depending on which word you use, because there's CCTV, there's security, and that that minimizes the risk of things happening for them. For men, there's not the same option. So there is, and women, frankly,
Really?
wouldn't. I can't imagine women just walking into an establishment, looking at a row of men standing up and saying, "I'll have this one."
Yeah.
Because for me, women need a lot more than just that quick release. And I know some women, as sex workers, will see clients for 10 or 15 minutes, where my minimum booking is 2 hours because it's getting to know the woman. To go back though, so that's where, because I'm independent, because there is no alternative, I do all of the work myself, my marketing, all the interactions. But those interactions, like I said to you earlier, speaking on the phone, using my instincts to just really assess whether I think this person is legitimate. And it's inbuilt in me now from all those years of dating in particular.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that there won't be risks. There certainly are. And I'm attuned to if something doesn't feel right. But that's never a 100% guarantee either. And so, yes, I'm alert to that. And I'd never invite people to my house. That's my sanctity. And so it's either in a hotel room or on some occasions at their home. And that is just another, but in both of those situations, I've got to be aware of, well, what do I do if something untoward occurs? And fortunately, it hasn't happened so far. But yeah, if it does, I need to appreciate how do I protect myself, both physically and also emotionally. And so yeah, look, it's certainly something I'm conscious of, but yeah, fortunately, it hasn't arisen.
I know that was a morbid thing to bring up, but I mean, it's the
Oh, it's a very
question
logical thing
that's out there.
to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I like, obviously I'm glad you haven't faced anything like that, right? And hopefully you won't, but I had to ask, especially, being blind has kind of changed my, I don't know, I guess the way I think through things. I was always, raised to sit at a chair facing the door, be able to watch over a room. I had a concealed carry when I got out of the Marines. I had a certain mindset, and I've always like I was raised and trained to be very aware of my surroundings. What I can be, the extent to which I can be aware of my surroundings now is limited, right? I've got less inputs from the world, but I still am very cognizant anytime that I'm out of everything that I hear or just the intuition, like you talked about. And so it's kind of I guess I was trying to put myself in your shoes a little bit there, and it's just, yeah, it's again
If I
very,
may,
very. Go ahead.
there- there's another sort of you've sort of got me thinking of another aspect of this work. So I often see people with disabilities. So there's a regular client that I've seen who is blind in one eye and going blind in the other, and another client who is in a wheelchair. And so a variety of disabilities, whether it's mobility or sight or hearing. So what that first up, I think that's terrific that, like everyone, they should be able to seek out intimacy. It shouldn't be affected by any disabilities they have. But it's also given me a great, much more, a deeper insight into what it's like for them. Because while I don't experience it, when we're going out to a venue or walking the streets, I've got to be far more attuned to what it must be like for them. And I really appreciate that because, say, I was traveling with the woman in a wheelchair, and so I was constantly, I was looking out for any divots in the road or people that weren't paying attention that were coming towards us. So I felt greatly appreciated or appreciative of what they go through. And for them to feel that they can allow themselves to feel relaxed more than they normally would, really makes a difference for them. And so that's something that's probably not spoken about or understood, that for someone with whatever it is, circumstance, that it could be physical or emotional or other challenges they face, in many ways, we are just like a companion of any other sort. It could be a disability support worker.
Yeah.
But the difference is we offer a breadth of other services if that's something they're after.
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, a huge part of your job is being present. And I mean, because I really, at the most basic level, it probably boils down to that, is being present and attentive, as you said, to whoever you're with, which is, I guess, what other things like that have been, I would imagine that was kind of a surprise, or not, an unexpected area, I guess, that you were getting business from, having entered that field. Like, have there been other, I'm sure you've probably crossed paths with people from all walks of life, and probably some very incredible people too. Just like this podcast has put me in conversation with people that I would have never had business crossing paths with. But it's been so cool to be able to do that. I'm sure this has probably done the same for you. Like, what else has been unexpected that's come out of this for you?
Yeah, look, it certainly has. And I've always said that dating has given me the ability to meet people I would never have otherwise met, whether that be because of their professions or their cultural and ethical backgrounds or just their daily viewpoints. But it steps up a notch doing the escorting work, because in some cases it would be a woman who is a high-powered CEO, and she's busy making decisions all day long, every day. And frankly, so are most women. They might be running the household, looking after the kids, looking after the partner, or whatever it might be. And they just get to a point where they wish someone could take control. So a simple example would be, like, a busy woman doesn't have time to get her physical needs met. She will reach out to an escort. And let's say we're going to meet for dinner. I will ask her if she's got any food allergies or intolerances. And once I understand that, I can say, well, let me take us out for dinner. If you want, I can just choose from the menu. And there's like an audible gasp of like, oh, thank goodness someone is making the decision and it's not me.
Yeah.
And I think that's a tip for any men dating. Do all the right things, but don't constantly ask women to make the decision for you. And I hope that there's women listening to this podcast who are nodding their heads vigorously, thinking, yes, finally, Amanda can do that.
Maybe you'll get some. Go ahead.
Well, I do hope I get some business because of that, or even, fundamentally that men learn that this is a way to treat women.
Yeah.
So there's been that, and there's also been, that loneliness that I spoke to about. There are so many women who probably don't feel confident or comfortable to talk to their friends to say, I really want sex. And because there's often a misinformed taboo that women post-menopause should shut up shop and just get on with the rest of their lives. It is, in my experience, and I've met many, many women in that circumstance or at various points of their menopause journey, that the opposite is true. They might feel increasing desire, but they don't feel that they can talk to many people about that. Fortunately, here in Australia, there's been a lot more conversation in the media and on podcasts and in the medical profession, making it less of an issue and allowing women to speak more freely about what's going on for them and how they can both deal with the symptoms and also expand what they're wanting to do. So that there's that, and then there's some of my clients don't tell anyone that they've seen an escort for probably obvious reasons, because they don't want to be judged. But also there's quite a few who do have someone that they feel comfortable to tell, because they feel enlightened that they've had this profound experience that really, and I'm here to tell you, has changed their lives. And I've heard this time and time again, because they've felt seen and observed and listened to and touched. You can see an incredible change and transformation. It's not too strong a word to say that they've come out of their shell. And in some circumstances, I've provided them something that has opened a door to where they might go next in their life. And is really the key for some women, is just to see that there is more to the life that they've been told that they must follow a certain pathway, and it hasn't worked out for them. So it's like I'm, opening a door that they can go through and then go on with the journey.
What is that? Is it restored confidence? Is it just like kind of a reset in terms of it's been a long time? I mean, what do you think that is?
Well, it can be that they've not had sex or intimacy for a very long time. And I'll give you one profound example. There's a woman that I saw about 18 months ago. She was a virgin at the age of 55. And I don't think these stories are told very often, if at all. And that was because of religious and cultural upbringings. Mm-hmm. And it was wonderful that she had got to a point where she was able to reach out. And we had a lovely time together. We did all the usual conversing beforehand to truly understand what she might want to experience. And since that first encounter, which was really beautiful and profound, we stayed in contact, and it just allowed me to look. She could see that her upbringing wasn't necessarily what worked for her. So I tapped into something by being that first person for her. She subsequently has had a couple of other experiences, and we've spent an overseas holiday together.
What?
Yeah, she's the person I mentioned was in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
So to be able to go from very introverted person with limited, no experience, and to then feel safe to have a week-long overseas holiday with me, the difference was stark and incredible. That the laughter and the joy and the appreciation that my life does not have to go this way that I've been told. There are so many more opportunities, and I may or may not ever see her again, and that's beside the point. But I've shown her that you can break apart the stereotypes and the cultured way that you are told that you must live. And that is probably the most profound thing I experience.
Yeah, man. And I mean, obviously she's in a wheelchair. She's probably on top of that, having never been in a relationship to that level of intimacy, like she needed to know that that's not a barrier, right? Like, yes, obviously for some people, they're going to be like, no, get away from me, you're in a wheelchair. But that's not most people. That is a small minority. But sometimes, we build up our own boxes of how we think other people see us, and that can hold us back in whatever capacities. That's really cool, and just kind of a crazy story. Like, You guys ended up going on a week-long holiday together. It's just that's cool. I mean, for you, like, has this opened stuff up for you in any way? Are you out there dating, or is it all now that this is my profession right now? I'm not in a place where that's
Look,
what's that world like for you?
as you can imagine, my time is limited. So and I do put a great deal of time into both attracting clients and having the conversations, and then after the encounter, staying in touch just to make sure they're okay and doing that aftercare. And if they're ongoing clients, we'll often converse fairly regularly. So yeah, look, I do still date on occasion, and as you would expect, I'm very upfront about what I do, so that anyone who's perhaps interested in dating me, they know that that is my profession, and they've got to be okay with that. And if they're not, no problem. That's perfectly fine. But they're well informed at the outset. And look, I must say though, I still have a part-time day job, because
Okay.
as much as people might think that I'm a high flyer, I'm making a fortune, it's not true. Um, it's a lot of work for not as much money as people would think. And I'm often approached by men who want to get into this industry. They might have listened to me on a podcast like this one, Zach, and thought, that's great. I love sex and I love money. I'm going to become, gigolo escort companion.
Yeah.
But when they do reach out to me, I'm very quick to just check their why. Why are you wanting to do this? And if it's just sex and money, then I'm sorry, my friend, you've come to the wrong place, because that is not what clients want. You've got to be a fully formed adult. You've got to be really caring and attentive. So yeah, it's a lot of work for me to have my part-time job, and they know what I do, so that's great. And this professional side of me doing the escorting, and also my own private time, because we all need our own downtime. And I do often get people say to me, how do you manage all of this? Like, seriously,
It seems like a lot. Yeah.
it really is a lot. And I travel extensively. So in the last 3 weeks, I've been in 3 different cities here in Australia. And in addition to that, I've got my day job and my friends and my family and my own time to myself and occasional dating. For most people, they'll be like, no way would I ever want to do that. And I get that. I really do. So, if anyone is listening and thinks, yes, I could do what George is doing, maybe think again. And by all means, I'm happy to have a conversation with someone. But what I want is more quality men in this space. And I think like anything, there are some people who are in an industry for nefarious reasons. And I really hate the fact there are some male escorts who don't have women's best interests at heart. And that's really unfortunate and awful, frankly. But I'm trying to raise the quality of people that do this work, while also fundamentally making women feel that it is something they could reach out to do or to experience, and that it's not a wicked thing that happens, and it's not something they should be embarrassed about, but conversely, something that they should feel proud of and empowered, that they can actually ask for what they want. They don't have to follow the stereotypes of society and just put that sex thing away for good and lock the cupboard and don't go there again.
Yeah, it does. I'm glad you haven't taken this like flippant attitude about it. Obviously I didn't know what to expect here. The way that you had written about it, I didn't expect you to be that way, but it's also, I know how dudes are, right? Even I think the other men coming to you and like talking about like, yeah, I like sex, I like money, that kind of points to how we are. And, obviously in a general, like a very simple way, we're a little more, uh, rough around the edges. And I think in that context, largely or can be generally. Because I think it speaks to a genuineness. And again, I get strong impressions from people. I've gotten zero hint of BS from you, which I'm glad. Again, you never know. I recorded an episode with a guy yesterday that will not be aired because he had obviously lied about his credentials. That happens from time to time, but like, and it's, I just, I, I don't know how many women listen to this show. I don't know how many Australian women listen to the show or women who live in places where this is legal, but I think these are all very human things, and you've presented them in a very human way, just a very like this is how it is, and that's very valuable.
Yeah. Well, that's super important for me, Zach. At the end of the day, I've got to live with myself. And I've always been strong on my values and my ethics and my motivations. So when I started this work, I spent quite a lot of time reflecting on what will I accept, what won't I accept, how will I be as a man in this industry, and I've got to look myself in the mirror every day and know that I'm doing the best job I can. And sure, we all mess up from time to time, and I'm often thinking, well, could I have done better in that experience? But look, I have a lot of honor and respect for myself as a man. We've all had our own issues that have come up through life. And for me, it's about learning from those things. And I've done a lot of work on myself. And I like to bring that forward in a way that can make a difference. And so, yeah, and that's, for me, it's so simple. But it's, like they say, it takes a long time to become an overnight success. And what I mean by that is that, not that I'm wildly successful, but it's taken my 53 years to become this man, that I am here. And I want to keep going and evolving and improving and doing good in the world. And so, yeah, that's what I think makes me stand out. And another point that I'll mention is that if women were to, say, Google straight male escort, what you'll generally find is a particular type. And, I'd be curious as to what you think. Yeah, if I may just ask you, if you were to imagine typing into Google straight male escort, what do you think you would see? Well, see, no pun intended, but what do you need comes forward to you?
I can see the giant penis staring back at me through my eyelids right now. No, I would imagine a mid-20s or early 30s jacked dude. I guess I would probably like what a male porn star would look like, I guess.
You're 100% right.
Okay.
That is, and when women do seek out that's what they see. And no, I have no issue with that whatsoever, because clearly they have a market. And but that's just not the clients. The clients that I see don't want that at all, because here I am in my mid-50s. I've got a couple of university degrees. I've got life experience, and I can hold a conversation. I don't spend any time in the gym. And
you don't?
It's all about, no,
that shocks me. Okay, that is not what I kind of pictured you as being a 53-year-old version of that. That's funny.
Oh, no, man.
That's so funny.
Oh, okay. Look, I look after myself physically, but I surf, I swim, and those type of things. And look, I think the gym is awesome for so many people. It provides so many great parts to them. But in terms of my look and my personality and what I present, it is the antithesis of that. Because I really care and I really love and respect women. Not saying they don't, because I'm sure they do, but that's where I think I've got a distinct edge over other people. And it's just who I am. And I just capitalize on my traits and my experience and the way I want to be. And that is, and I know that's what, because women say to me, they would be intimidated by a guy with those bulging muscles. And I'm a bit of an anomaly. I have no tattoos.
Not one?
Not a single one.
Not even a rap sound? What the hell, man?
I love going to the beach in summertime. I'm now the freak, the one that stands out. And I like that a lot.
That's funny.
But anyway, so yeah, many escorts they've got this sense of the muscles rippling, and I just don't do that. That's not my style, and it doesn't appeal to my market.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned having a lot of clients who are going through menopause or even post-menopause. Do you feel that you have an older client base?
Yes, I do. So I have clients, sort of, I guess the general age is from mid 40s to mid 60s. There's
Okay.
some older than that. There's one client who is 80. And at first, and I think that might make people feel a bit odd. And it's, look, I must say, when I first heard from that client, it made me rethink, oh, gee, is that something I can be okay with?
Yeah.
And that she was a lot older than me. But once we had a conversation and we'd met for a social date for a coffee, I could actually see the beauty in her and what it was that I could provide for her. And she was a client of mine for 2 years. So I think what it surprises people about when you say, a certain age, they think, well, really, do they still have a sex drive? Do they still want intimacy?
Yeah.
And while it's not the same for everyone, far from it, um, I hope that helps people appreciate that we shouldn't judge people just by their age or their size or their any disabilities or any background, because I've had people of all shapes and sizes and backgrounds and what have you come to me. They all have in common that desire for attention, to be held, and some intimacy. So we should consider that the benchmark of we all have some need for touch and feeling, and we're social creatures. So yeah, it's easy to make assumptions about people, whether it be post-menopause or age, and yeah, and look, I know that I can bring something special to my clients, and that's why I put in all the effort.
Yeah.
And it's important to acknowledge that I don't accept every inquiry that I get, because and I've had some clients, and there are a lot of time wasters, sadly, or people who, and in some cases, they're just people who are nervous and they've reached out, but they feel not ready. And that's perfectly fine. But I also need to feel a connection with a person. And so if I'm not getting a good sense that they really respect who I am and the value of what I do, I will just politely say, no, I'm not willing to accept this booking,
Yeah.
because I can't do a half-hearted job. It is my job, so I want to put the best foot forward and do the best job I can. And if I'm not feeling a connection, I won't take their money. And yeah, I just need to, as we've talked about throughout this chat, look after my safety, feel respected, know that I'm the right person for this particular client. And yeah, I don't reduce those standards for myself, and I don't want to reflect the work that I do in a way that's anything other than as good as I can do it.
That seems, again, hadn't thought of that, but that it seems like if you didn't handle it that way, things could get unhealthy for you very quickly, just to where maybe from a sense of wearing yourself down and just it seems like that could kind of run away from you pretty quickly. Um,
Yeah, that's right. And I guess, and again, all of the things that I'm saying is just it's my way of approaching it.
yeah.
And it's tempting when money's waved in front of you and you're thinking, well, gee, could I tolerate that encounter? But I've always just, if I'm not feeling it, then I won't do it. And the money for, as I'm sure you've been able to appreciate from this great chat, Zach, it's more than the money for me. Money is a nice outcome. Sure, we've all got bills to pay, but I won't take it at the risk of any negative impacts on myself or the client.
Yeah. Is that something you had to learn from mistakes?
Not really, because, and that's part of the experience from dating for all those years, for over a decade. That set so many things as foundational for me. So coming into the work as an escort, I didn't expect to make a fortune, and thankfully, my expectations have been met. When you might see the rates that I charge and think, oh my God, that guy's loaded. let me tell you, it takes a lot of money to get those bookings. Sorry, a lot of time to get those bookings, and you're not rolling in cash. Believe me, I was getting far more money in the corporate and government sector that I'm getting now, but I feel much more enriched in the outcome of the impact I can make on people's lives is over and above what I was getting in being in a stressed environment, doing things that just, I don't know, ultimately felt a bit futile.
Yeah, doing things you hate, it will suck life out of anyone. And I think it sucks life out of a lot of people and leads to other health issues downstream. That's, it's not like you hating your job is a justification to turn into an alcoholic, but that does happen to people, or treating their misery with food or whatever else. And it's just, so, I mean, there's definitely a cost to pay for that kind of stuff. And, I want to make sure, I was really curious to cover this with you. I think because, I'm in Colorado, and there's currently a bill, going through legislation that might decriminalize this here. And like I said, there's, it's been legal in certain areas in Vegas for a long time. And then it seems like Maine has decriminalized a little bit as well. So I'm sure there's going to be more of a movement in the coming years in the United States. With it having been an established, kind of part of the economy in Australia, and with you've been in the business for several years, I know you've said it's different for male escorts than it is for female escorts, but it sounds like some female escorts and women who are in this business. If you had a magic wand, setting up structures in an environment like this that might be now opening up some form of legality around this, is there, what safety nets do you feel need to be in place to have, places where people are taken care of, everyone is safe physically, that we've kind of discussed in everything else?
Look, I think there's a few key things, Zach. I think regulation can be helpful because it brings a certain level of standards to any industry. So that's not to say that, because many workers don't feel comfortable in being outed. They don't feel that they need to register their full name and provide data to a government body or a regulatory authority. So for some, on the one hand, it might increase the level of safety, and it could be a union or other protections that look after sex workers. So that could be helpful, but it's also got its challenges. But I guess the broader thing, which I would love, if I had a magic wand, it would be around society's perspectives of doing this work, and that we are treated just like any other profession. So imagine you're doing this work. Look, it's really difficult to get a bank loan, for example, or even a credit card, because so many authorities, and that could be insurance for whatever, if you were to be just straight up about what you do, automatically you're judged based on perception, which is really unfair. If I was a physiotherapist, for example, it would be totally different. I'm providing a service that is physical and emotionally helpful, but the overlay of sex is the thing that always trips up society. So I just wish we were treated like anyone else. We've got a job, we've paid the bills. So there's that element, and that there are safety mechanisms put in place. And I'm as I say, I don't have to deal with it significantly at all. But a register for clients who whether they sexually assault a sex worker or anyone else, any harassment and bullying like in the workplace, that should be reported. It should be treated seriously. Authorities like the police should be really understand that this is real work. It's just because it's, as the saying is, sex work is real work, and treat us like any other employer or employee or whatever it is. And just don't look through that lens that has been and probably always will be something to put people down. It's what we say, punching down to people who are doing a good job. And as we know, it's the oldest profession. It wouldn't happen if there wasn't demand for it. So it's, we're just going about our business, doing what people ask for, but yet are vilified for it in so many ways, and that's a real that's a very sad state of circumstances.
Yeah, and I think another component to having structures built around these things is also the slippery slope, especially these days, of that turning into that data is being tracked, that data being used against you in other way, even maybe less overt ways than you can't get a bank loan because you are a sex worker, and all that takes is change of hands of power, the next election going the other way and then having access to that data for a year. And it's a slippery slope, man, because you want people to be able to be safe, but it's like the cost of these things seems to be going up more and more, right? As technology is starting to just propagate into even more areas than anyone ever would have thought possible. So, but again,
and I know that any workers listening to this might say, no, I don't want what George is suggesting. And I'm no expert in this whatsoever. And fortunately, here in Australia, there are various support groups for sex workers, and they're almost universally run by people who are or have been sex workers. So they're looking out for their kind. And so and for some reason, like I alluded to, some women wouldn't want, or some workers wouldn't want regulation, because yes, it might protect them, but it also might expose them to more retribution. And yeah, we all know about the sensitivity of data and what can happen, which happens increasingly. Data getting out in the public domain and just the consequences of that. So look, it's certainly not something I have the answers for.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that in the UK probably is a better example than anywhere else right now. It's just very, very slippery slope, a cliff to slide right off of. So it's, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Again, it went to a lot of areas that I wasn't really expecting, and I'm so glad it did. Again, everything that you've said, even with your magic wand, if the situation just kind of came back to being human and human needs and human issues. So it's I mean, this is what I hoped it would be, right? I learned a lot. I was very curious, and I think you've presented this in a way that I wouldn't have expected, and I doubt listeners probably did when they heard the introduction. I've only had one other sex worker on here before, and she's I don't know, that might have been like episode 44. She's the dominatrix, and so it wasn't necessarily sex exchange. It was more of the fetish kind of stuff without going farther because it's not legal, but where she's at. But it's the stuff goes on. So it's important to talk about where if I have any friends heading down to Australia, where can these ladies find you at? Or if there's any guys that heard this and are like, hey, I am the man who's attentive and want everything else that comes with what you talked about today.
Yeah, sure. Well, they can go to my website, which is georgegoulburn.com. It's quite easy. They can find me on Instagram as George Goulburn Official, and I'm sure you'll pop those in the show notes.
Yes.
You can find me there. Yeah, and look, I love talking about this for the reasons that hopefully have become abundantly clear. It is just to break down assumptions, and the fact that you have, as other podcasters I've been on, have come away with something that you didn't expect is fantastic. And that's why I voluntarily reach out and do these type of things.
Awesome, man. Well, you're great at communicating it. So hopefully this sends some business your way and you're able to get some money and have a positive impact on someone's life. Just thank you again, man, for taking the time. I think this went a little long, and I appreciate you for sticking in for all of it.
No, my pleasure, and thanks to you, Zach, and hopefully your listeners will get something juicy, or well, not juicy, just really informative from this. And keep in mind, Australia is a lovely country. It's only a plane ride away.
Yeah, and Thanks everyone at home for listening. If you want something juicy, head on over to George's website. I'm sure he's got something juicy for you there. So reach out to him if you take a trip down to Australia. And remember, this is all about exploring curiosity. So thanks for coming into this with an open mind. If you learned something from it, share it around, leave a rating and review, and I'll see you next week. Bye.